lets out with the AK, and the AK wins. And it doesn't hit me in the body armor, Andy. Those motherfuckers. I wore that body armor for all those years. They could have had the decency to at least put one in me there. But no, it hit my femur, my right leg. I was just putting my weight down on it, and it blew right above my knee. It just blew my femur like out the back of my leg. God damn, man. I was worse than useless. I was actually a hazard just because I couldn't stop screaming. I don't know. Did you scream when you got shot?
No, I'm a little bit more of a man than you.
I'm such a...
We've known that for years, man. Jimmy. Come on.
I couldn't stop. I'd reload my lungs with air, and I'm like, damn, I can't stop screaming. It was funny. But honestly, at that point, I became a witness to the American spirit, and actually to my buddies. Like they just fucking did what we trained to do. Like there was nothing. Yeah. It was amazing.
How can I help? How can I be useful in ending needless suffering? Do not be afraid of work that has no end.
We have to organize a social movement.
We have an opportunity to lead by example versus just talking, hot air. I think the more people in this fight, the more we grow. Eventually it could change. The people are the ones that can make the change.
Welcome back, everybody, to this week's episode of Change Agents, an Ironclad original. Today, my guest is Jimmy Hatch, a man that I've actually known for close to 20 years. Jimmy is a retired member of Naval Special Warfare. He is a retired SEAL. He's the author of the book Touching the Dragon. He's also the founder of Spike's Canine Fund, which we're going to be talking about in depth today. He was a canine handler during the latter portion of his career and is in a position to speak from authority and experience on the implementation of canine units, canine tactics, techniques, and procedures, and how they can change the battle space overseas, but also he can speak from that same position on how they can be utilized here inside of the United States. Now, one of the things that is surprising to me that I discovered in this episode is that ballistic vests are not common issue for working dogs. And there are a variety of reasons that people will provide as excuses or justification to not have them, and Jimmy does a great job of carving his way through those in this episode. He created Spike's Canine Fund to help solve this problem. It provides custom-fit ballistic vests, protective equipment, and medical cost assistance to working canines. It's named after his first canine, Spike, who was killed in a mission in Iraq. Spike's Canine also provides specialized training, and they aspire to ensure that every canine receives exactly what they need every time. Hopefully you enjoy today's episode with Jimmy Hatch. Let's get into it. You ready to dig into our past a little bit and talk about some canines?
Sure, man, for sure.
Probably the easiest way is to start is just kind of unpack your background. What brought you into the Navy? How'd you hear about the teams? And give me the wave tops or whatever detail you want to about your career.
Yeah. So I started, I was pretty young, adopted a couple times, lived in different families, grew up in Utah, was born in here in Virginia, but I grew up in Utah and, I grew up in relationships that were transactional, right? So if you do this, you get this. So like if you're good, you get food. If you're bad, you get your ass whipped, that kind of stuff. I wasn't super close, really with anyone in my family, just because it had moved around a bunch. And I just took to reading war books. And when I was supposed to be, reading Steinbeck and Hemingway and all those guys that I love to read now, I was reading, Vietnam books and, books about World War II. And I just knew that I had this belief that if I showed up in the military and I worked my ass off, that it was a transactional environment. I understood how that goes. And furthermore, I would get to punish some people who hurt innocent people. And as a kid it's been interesting since I retired from the SEAL teams, going to these different treatment facilities or whatever, and I've been to a few, the amount of abuse that guys in our former line of work suffered as children is pretty significant. And I was talking to one of my professors, actually, probably the smartest person I've ever met in my life, up at Yale. She's a cognitive scientist. And she said, that's why you guys are such good fighters. And this is a woman that doesn't know anything about, but she's her undergraduate stuff is philosophy and math. She's like the Spartans, if you abuse the kids, man, they're going to be badass warriors. It was just that simple to her. So it was interesting. But back to the point, I just wanted to punish people that were like the people that had been shitty to me when I was a kid. And, you're a kid, you're innocent. You can't, you don't have any real say about anything. You get what you get. Right. So when I got to a place where I knew I could deal it, I was like, yeah, I want to be in on it. So I didn't realize, and truthfully, I don't know, Andy, that I'd have been able to admit that until relatively recently, that was part of the motivation. But really, I just wanted people to respect me and love me, because if I did a good job, people would really love me. I'll tell you what, man, hard to prove otherwise when, the night I got shot up, guys covering open ground in a gunfight.
Yeah.
You can call it what you want. I'm going to go ahead and call it love. And those helicopters.
I'd agree with you 100%, man. I look back at the stuff that we used to do and the things that they used to ask us to do. And, the training, it develops great problem-solving skills, and you understand teamwork and communication. All the stuff you can read about in any military leadership book. But at the end of the day, I don't remember ever thinking about foreign policy. I don't remember ever thinking about anything other than trying to fight for the person that was to my left or right. Like, I would actually describe it oftentimes as a closer family than the ones I genetically have a tie to. But what you opened with, I think, is also true. It is transactional in nature, and I think people would be healthier on the exit of that community if they remembered that or knew about it on the entry to it. But it's love. We fought hard because we loved the people that we were there with.
Man, that's so true. I mean, you said it very succinctly, and that is also one of the difficulties in transitioning out of the military and it took me a little bit to figure out that I had to create that environment. Yep. Because it's not going to exist outside of what, was created essentially for us. We have to do that on our own, or at least that's my opinion anyway.
At what point in your career did you start integrating with the K9s?
So in 90, probably 97, 98, I wrote a paper. So, we were doing, the legacy mission. We were doing, it's a big, ships are huge and they have, God knows how many staterooms. And I was like, there's got to be an asset that can help us in this environment. Dogs, So I didn't know. I mean, I grew up reading about dogs. I grew up reading, Old Yeller, Where the Red Fern Grows, Call of the Wild, all that stuff. I was a big dog kid. I always had dogs. And then I just thought, well, hey, if the cops are using them for stuff, we can probably use them. I just didn't know anything about the technical abilities of a dog. So I called a kennel, and I want to say they were in New Hampshire or maybe upstate New York. I said, hey, I'm just curious. Do you think a dog can help in this, type? And of course, they're selling dogs. They're like, yeah, for sure, 100%. Anyway, so I sat down, I did a little research, wrote a point paper, and sent it up, and they kept it. Turns out I didn't think anybody read it, but when I came back, they were like, hey, we need a shooter in the dog crew. And I'm like, fuck yeah, I'm on it, So that's how I really got involved. And Ike had kind of set the program up. Ike was a squared away dude, and he had it pretty well laid out. Of course, he was restricted by the things that, the military would let him do, but it was, the way it started, I think it was a really good deal.
What role, if you could explain to people, what role does the dog fill? I mean, and go in as broad terms as you want to, because I don't want to give away any TTPs, but as a handler, what kind of role were you looking to fill?
So essentially, I was looking to put the dog where the dog, who I consider to be a force multiplier. My job was really to put the dog where it could help the shooters the best. And as a shooter, that was super helpful. So it's interesting when I work with law enforcement folks now, there's a big separation oftentimes between the SWAT guys and the regular K9 guys, and they don't get along, and there's egos involved. And man, they're really denying themselves a serious asset for the really hard stuff that they have to do. They just don't know what they don't know. At any rate, I think being a shooter really helped, simply because I understood how the process went, and where to be and what was going to happen next, and all of those things. But so the dog can find bombs, the dog can find people, which was really the most important. And it kind of seemed to go in stages through the targets, right? Like get out of the helicopter, start, find bombs, find bomb, find, okay, we're at the spot. Boom. Dog sees the guys getting ready. He knows the deal. breach, or we just get inside and do what we got to do, and then look for bombs. So the difficulty really was after we'd gotten in a fight where the dog bit somebody, found somebody hiding, or somebody ran at us or whatever, and then trying to get the dog to go look for bombs after that was a little bit tough. It's like, you and I getting,
you guys switch
beating the
gears.
shit out of each other, and then like, all right, let's go pick up the fucking trash. Yeah.
What kind of additional training do handlers go through if they're going to go down that pipeline?
I think, there's two types of handlers, really. There's the shooters, and then there's the standard military folks that are dog, they're generally law enforcement, like MP, or in the Navy, we call them master arms. They have to actually learn how to kind of go out with us and not be too much of a pain, right? And some of them are actually really, really good. And we're taking on missions even without their dogs sometimes because we needed the people. But for the shooters, I think we don't have to worry about, learning how to integrate into the squadron. We just have to learn how to use that dog the best way we can. And I really struggled. Spike, my first dog, was what is called a push button dog. He was a titled dog. So there was a lot of discussion about, where we could get these dogs, and the Army guys had done it ahead of us. And they realized that the regular military couldn't provide the kind of dogs that we needed, because the type of stuff we were going to do involved, environmentals that regular military dogs don't.
Just call it non-traditional.
There you go. Yeah. So they were starting to go overseas to buy the dogs. They had to go overseas to buy the dogs. And in Holland, there's a police, that's a sport really, but it's a police qualification. The Dutch police, K9, I don't know. Gosh, I wish I knew all of it. But the initials are KN as in November, P as in Papa, V as in Victor, KMPV. And at the end of it, if the dog's successful, they get a score. And Spike had a super high score, which means that he was really well trained. So he had all the skills that we needed. We just had to actually take one of the things that he had learned out of it for our environment. He was trained in a police type setting, so we didn't want him to run up to a suspect with their hands up and just stand there and bark.
For sure.
That's dangerous. So we had to train that out of them, and we had to actually. Some of them really struggled with the environmental stuff. Like slick floors or dark and stairs, things like that. So for me, the shooter, it was getting me and the dog working together to figure out how to read each other and then figure out how to put the dog in the best spot I could so that he'd be most effective. So, if there's somebody running out of the building, am I ready to go? Am I close to the front, but still able to, all those little decisions that where to put the dog into play. And it's actually a little bit more nuanced than you would think. And it depends on the personality of the dog, right? So like, for me, I wasn't great at teaching Spike to be quiet. I want him to be fired up when he saw dudes stacking at the door. Yeah. And he'd like, rah, rah. So you don't want that. So and then I'd have to take him and hide him behind a tree so he couldn't see him stacked up and be like, hey, what's up, buddy? That kind of stuff. It was really fun. It was also, it was really interesting to see how, or try to, I think some of combat, I think you can probably find this in sport, and this would be a good thing to discuss with you later. But I think there's this natural animal instinct that we have as humans, and I think combat is the best place to see it, right? And I think it's interesting that the dogs are there; they're not trying to hide it. We spend a fair amount of our lives hiding that part of us and denying that it exists. But once you're in it together, man, that's I don't know how to explain that connection, but it's like you're like, okay. I mean, I'm still gonna have to clean up your poo later, but we're good,
Yeah. Hey everyone, Andy Stumpf here, the host of the Ironclad original Change Agents podcast. In addition to producing podcasts like Change Agents, Danger Close with Jack Carr, Oil and Whiskey with Roadster Shop, and others, Ironclad also works with some of the world's biggest brands like Mechanics Wear, Under Armour, the Navy SEAL Foundation, Anthem, and a ton of others to create industry-leading custom film series, commercials, podcasts, and more. We can also get your message in front of an audience of millions by placing it on podcasts and series just like this one. To check out more about Ironclad and see how they can help you elevate your company, brand, or business, check out thisisironclad.com. Thisisironclad.com. I was just going to say, talk me through the night of what happened with Remco on that objective. How'd that play out for you?
So Remco was assigned to, I had been fired from the dogs. I say that. Jet, who was killed in the extortion bird, he took Toby, my second dog, after I had a bad interaction with him. At any rate, they promoted me, made me a team leader. So I still love the dogs. And we were in Afghanistan on a deployment, and I would take Remco out on runs. His handler, Mike Toussaint, who's still a friend, was like, yeah, man, take him, because I like to run. And he'd like to go for runs. So I really liked him. He's a big, strong dog. He was bigger than any of the other dogs that I'd worked. He was a strong dude too, man. And he was fucking beautiful to watch run. At any rate, we get the call. We go do the deed. And I remember it was the only time, I always wore those little square plates.
Real smart, Jimmy. Real smart.
Well, so that night I put on my big plates because I'm like, dude, this is going to rock. And in fact, and I don't know if these guys have ever talked about it, but I went to a couple of dudes who are, one of them is very well known. The other one is not. But and I said, look, man, if I get shot in the junk tonight, I want you guys to step on my throat. Promise me, because I don't want to go home like that. And they both looked at me like, what the fuck? And I knew it was going to be on. And I don't know what compelled me to say that to those guys. Anyway, we got on the birds, and I remember coming into land, and your team leader, when you got hurt, was actually my troop chief that night.
Yeah.
Man, he's a stud.
He is a fucking stud of studs.
We were getting shot at pretty bad coming in. And, there was an argument about, and this is a tactical thing, but there were some arguments about tactics and how we should approach this whole thing. And I was a big one for being aggressive and, hitting them hard, which turned out, it was funny because I was in the hospital, I don't know, a month later, 3 weeks later. Some of the big high-ranking people came in to visit me and all that. They were talking about what a stupid decision to do. I'm like, well, actually, that was me.
Thank you. Appreciate the feedback. Yeah, my tactical decision.
Yeah. Anyway, we thought we were going to the Y, and we ended up on the X birds, and it was a handful. And so it took us a little bit of time to get moving. And the deal, man, hostage rescue is it's tough, and I think it's the hardest. And so you have to know who's who in the zoo. You can't just sling ammo around. You have to be smart. And so we started moving through these structures. I ended up getting to a place where we had to split up. So I took myself, one other shooter, and then Mike and his dog Remco, and we kept moving pretty good. We actually were headed almost south. Winds were out of the east. It's funny what you remember. And we ended up running into some civilians. We actually got into a little bit of a fight for a second. Kept moving, and then I saw something from one of the overhead assets that indicated, and I could look probably about 400 or 500 meters away. There were two dudes moving with some heavy stuff. I could see two dudes for sure. And we've been shot at by RPGs, at AKs, and of course PKMs. These guys were definitely heavy. And so I saw the light, and I was like, all right. We had just had a run-in with some civilians, kids actually, and I moved them out in the field, threw chem lights around them, and talked to the overhead asset that, hey, there's kids here as we're moving through. Because you know the deal. Those bad guys don't give a fuck. They just, if they're getting shot at, they're just going to spray. They don't care. So right after we set those kids down, that's when I saw the shooters. So we took off, and I didn't know they were shooters. I could just see dudes carrying heavy stuff. The environmentals were tough for nods. So I lined the dog up in the direction, kind of where the last place I saw him, and we were into the wind. So we were moving east, and I was watching the dog, and, I'd done this very thing more than once successfully. And knowing that the dog was going to give me a good indication and that the dog is quick and hard to shoot. So I basically made a bet that we could get to those guys, close on them, figure out who's who in the zoo while they're paying attention to the dog, and do what we need to do. Turns out that wasn't the case. We got to basically the edge of a ditch, kind of a little bit of a rise. I saw the dog's body language changes. He got big, his tail went up. I knew it was going to be on probably 10 meters from the ditch. I could see him, whoa, and he starts moving quicker. And so I'm right on him. And then he gets to the top of the ditch and boom, boom, 2 big muzzle flashes out of an AK. And I watched the dog. It flipped him backwards and blew his jaw off. And he was a big fucking dog, man. And he blew backwards, and I started shooting the guy who had been shooting him. Because of the muzzle flash, I could see it definitely wasn't Bowe Bergdahl, And so I started filling him in. And his buddy, I remember yelling to Mike, "Get the dog back." I'm shooting him, and I was shooting with an MP7. It's funny, man. Heads don't move much when you hit him in the face with an MP7.
Well, maybe you shouldn't take maybe don't take a toy gun.
It's so funny. When I came back, I think it was one of the old Master Chiefs that worked up in RDT&E. He said, "Look, this is your report on the MP7. He's sticking with it." I'm like, no. Pretty funny.
All right, so you're plugging holes in a dude with an MP7.
His buddy lets us out with the AK, and the AK wins. And it doesn't hit me in the body armor, Andy. Those motherfuckers. I wore that body armor for all those years. They could have had the decency to at least put one in me there. But no, it hit my femur, my right leg. I was just putting my weight down on it, and it blew right above my knee. It just blew my femur like out the back of my leg. And God damn, man. I remember, do you know a guy named Carlos Melita, who's a SEAL who got shot up in Panama? He's paralyzed. He was paralyzed. He won the Ironman for the, the wheelchair athletes. Yeah. He won that 5 times. Like and I remember asking him, what did it feel like when you got shot? And he goes, "Man, I felt like I was on fire." I remember. I'm like, "Carlos said, oh yeah." And I was screaming. It was really messed up. I was worse than useless. I was actually a hazard just because I couldn't stop screaming. I don't know. Did you scream when you got shot?
No, I'm a little bit more of a man than you.
I'm such a.
We've known that for years, man. Jimmy. Come on.
I couldn't stop. I'd reload my lungs with air, and I'm like, damn, I can't stop screaming. It was funny. But honestly, at that point, I became a witness to the American spirit, and actually to my buddies. Like they just fucking did what we trained to do. Like there was nothing. Yeah. I mean, it was amazing. And of course, I got to talk to the TF-160 guys. Actually, the guys that were on that helo were at this function where, they have those annual balls where they bring their their wife. And I got to stand up there and say, "Look, man, imagine the worst night of your life. You're laying there bleeding to death in some place in another side of the world. And you have no doubt that these dudes are going to come get you." I mean, I didn't doubt it for a second. And I was that's a pretty significant security blanket if you really think about it. I was blown away. And it's funny, through this dog stuff, we've been doing these little fundraisers all over the country. We did one recently in Wisconsin, jumping. Last year, this guy walks up to me at the fundraiser, and I'm like, "Hey, man, you look a little familiar." And he goes, "Yeah, last time I saw you, you were on the floor of my helicopter bleeding all over the fucking place." And I was like, "Holy shit." It's one of the crew chiefs. It was really cool. At any rate, those guys did come and get me. Go ahead.
How do you think it would have played out if the dog wasn't there and you utilized it the way that it did, or the way that you did? Would they have had the jump on you?
100%. Yeah. They saw us coming. They had to have seen us coming, or at least heard us. We're in a poppy field, and they had harvested it, and it was in July, so it was like walking on fucking potato chips. You know what I mean? It was loud.
Yeah, that's horrible.
And truthfully, it was a full moon, and there wasn't a lot of wind. Yeah. So you know the deal. It was not a good deal for us. I think had we not had the dog, we would most certainly be dead.
Okay.
Most certainly. And we're lucky. We're very lucky. And Remco, he paid the price for it. And so he's part of the catalyst behind, the whole Spikes Canine Fund thing.
That was going to be my next question. I mean, obviously there was a lot that happened, and you and I had run into each other sporadically after you had gotten hurt. Because I remember you're like, "Hey, man, you have nerve damage. I have nerve damage. When does this go away?" I'm like, "Yeah, never." You're like, "Fuck, that's not the answer I'm looking for."
Yeah, exactly.
It was a lot, and that's a 5-hour episode in and of itself. But I can only imagine that what happened with Remco and your experience with the dogs had something to do with you wanting to found Spikes Canine. So what is it, and what are you trying to do with it?
Yeah, so basically, after I got out of the mental health institutions and out of the Navy, I really struggled to find a place where I could feel like I was, that my heart could be in it. And I worked for a couple of different places. It wasn't working. So I went to the police department that had come to my house the night that I got suicidal and had taken me, Toni Morrison says, people won't remember what you did for them, but they'll remember how you made them feel. And those guys, I was hopeless. I just didn't feel like I was a shooter.
Yeah.
I had no fucking ability to do anything else in this world. And I don't really want to do anything else in this world. So fuck it. Those guys, just by their conduct and their kindness, and they could have fucking tased me. And I was hoping they would. I wanted them to shoot me. Like, I was like, all right, I didn't have the sack to pull the trigger. So when those guys get here, they're going to want to be tough guys. And I fucking like violence. And I'll get them to do it. And man, they were so cool. And the cops call it
verbal jujitsu.
Yeah, that's it. They had me. And so I had this little quote I made up for those guys after what they did. Never underestimate your ability to affect the trajectory of another human life, especially at their most vulnerable moments. I was fucked, man. And those guys were kind and respectful, and it was pretty amazing. So I went back to that department and I said, hey, man, can I help you guys with your dogs? And they're like, yeah, for sure. They knew they didn't need my help. They just knew I needed somebody to put their arm around me and say, hey, we can use you. So, and this is the first time I've actually really talked about this, but I didn't feel like being around the command at all. I felt like that mission was a failure and that it was my fault because I got shot. And at the point where I got shot, the deal, man, you got to get the fat, screaming, bloody guy out of there so you can continue on. And I felt like during that time period, the enemy had enough to, get him out of there, which turns out it wasn't the case. But I've actually had a chance to communicate with Bergdahl about some of those things through an intermediary because we're not actually supposed to talk until all the court shit is over.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah, but those guys brought me in. They let me wear the decoy suit. They let me, take pictures and help. And I actually could help. They had a couple of dogs that were really hard, more like ours. And I was able to help them a little bit. And it made me feel good. But at some point, one of the dogs got hurt and needed a surgery on his neck. And the city was like, hey, man, we're not going to put that money into it. And I was blown away. So I took a picture of me and Spike from our deployment in Iraq right before he was killed. And I went to a dude who knows how to do Photoshop, and he helped me put this together. So each one of those stars represents a dog that I worked with that was killed in combat, and starting with Spike and ending with Remco. I put him on a sweatshirt, got on social media, and just said, hey, I'm trying to raise money for a dog that needs a surgery. And a lot of people like dogs, turns out. I made enough. Yeah. I made about $6,000, and it was enough to send the dog down to NC State to get his surgery and then pay for the officers' travel. And then I had money left over, so we started that in 2014. I got tax exempt status in 2015. We really took off, I think, when Anderson Cooper did that thing with me, that Champions for Change or whatever, that program. I think it was in 2017. A lot of people started to see who we were. That really helped us as an organization. And so we've helped dogs in all 50 states. We help dogs that work for a community or for the military or for the State Department. So not like support dogs, but dogs that work for the police department, search and rescue, fire department. There's a lot of fire department accelerant detection dogs. Like they can see if somebody poured gas in their house oh yeah, it's pretty wild. And it's funny, the dogs that, like, there's one of them the one I've been around the most or seen the most, is actually a pit bull from the shelter that they got out and they taught him. And yeah, he's a badass. In fact, the vest we provided him saved him. He fell through a burnt floor, and there was a chunk of rebar sticking up, and it hit the vest, or it would have gored him and killed him. Yeah. Anyway, so we help out working dogs. Like I said, we've helped dogs in all 50 states, mostly with ballistic vests. We provide ballistic vests made by Canine Storm, is the company that made the vests that I used when I was going overseas. Of course, we didn't use ballistic vests then because the guns we were going against, it wouldn't have helped.
Yeah. Are you looking for a change agent in the energy space? Look no further. Ketone IQ is a category leader. Fuel does not need to be filled with caffeine and sugar. HVMN is changing the narrative. No sugar, no caffeine, no BS. It's just calm, clean energy on demand that improves performance and cognition. HVMN was awarded a $6 million Phase 2 STTR by the U.S. Special Operations Command to produce a ketone-based product that would improve performance at altitude and protect against cognitive loss in hypoxic environments. I'll be honest with you, the flavor is rough, but what's real is the energy, the sustained energy that you will get when you take Ketone IQ. Actually, probably my favorite thing about it, though, beyond the energy that you get from it, or in addition to the energy that you get from it, is its size. I mean, you can stuff a couple of these in your backpack. It's not bulky. It's not a full-size drink. Throw it in your bag. Take one when you need it, and you're off and running with clean, sustained energy. Please go check out our partner, HVMN, the brand behind Ketone IQ, at hvmn.com/changeagents. I'll hit you with that one more time. Let's do it military phonetically. Hotel Victor Mike November.com/changeagents. Still got it. It's no big deal. To receive 30% off your first subscription order of Ketone IQ. Why don't departments issue vests to their dogs? And this is one where you would think it would almost be just common sense. I mean, I look at those working dogs, I would almost call them officers, for lack of a better term, to delineate them between, an officer and a service dog. Both are equally, I don't want to put any value judgment on either side of it, but I think there is a distinction between dogs that help people after and then dogs that are literally there doing the job with human beings. I would have thought that a ballistic vest would be standard issue.
No, man, none of them. Actually, I take that back. Boston does that. Well, I think they have a group. They have a big group of people that run a nonprofit up there that pay for all the dogs in that area. But we put dogs in vests up there in some of the adjoining cities. I don't understand it either. I think part of it is, Andy, that, do you remember when we went from iron sights to the optics?
Oh, yeah. You mean when we
remember that? And guys are like, fuck those optics. These iron sights have been working for centuries. They're reliable. And you're like, all right, you're whipping their ass in the shooting competition, Yeah, it's the same kind of thing. Guys are like, oh, the vest makes my dog slow down. Not true. If you train in it, like you have to train in your body armor, and I had to train in mine. If you train in it, it doesn't do anything. In fact, it's so light. The last one that I got sent to me from the company, I took out and shot it and did a video with it because I didn't believe it would stop. And I shot it with a 9mm hollow point and a 9mm ball in it. There were no issues. It's super light. And they did a heat study. A lot of guys will say, oh, the dog will get hot. Doesn't affect them at all. In fact, if they're wearing it, it protects them from the direct sunlight. The way dogs get rid of heat through their mouth and a little bit through their feet.
Yeah.
They don't sweat like you and I do. I think that's part of it. It's partially like, I don't want to put that on my dog. It'll slow him down. They just don't know what they don't know. I went to a funeral recently of a dog that had gotten killed who we had given a vest to. And the officer didn't have the vest on because they didn't think that call was that big of a deal. And the dog ended up getting killed. And, I'm not going to bust anybody's chops. I can't make that person feel any worse than they already do. But
yeah.
I just don't want people to have to hold their dead dog feeling it get cold like I did on the way home from a mission. I don't want people to have to go through that stuff if you don't have to, and we're here. We provide it. Like, I actually have had to fight with dudes to give them this shit. And occasionally, like I've had to give a guy's wife the vest, who she then gave it to her husband, who then put it on the dog because the chief of police didn't want him to accept the gift or something. I don't know. So there's a whole bunch of crazy shit that goes on in law enforcement, as you can imagine. And the dog stuff is just one of those things.
Do you guys do training as well in addition to the equipment?
We do. So that we really have, I guess you'd call it 4 campaigns: ballistic vests, medical, and the medical stuff. That's how we started. That's a pretty big deal, especially for the retired dogs, like guys from our unit that retire, and adopt one of the dogs they worked with. I mean, those dogs they're like us, man. They get the shit beat out of them while they're working. And then when they retire, they need a lot of help physically. And so they're going to the vet a lot. And, most families don't have $10K. They can just drop on an orthopedic surgery for a dog that got his ass pounded by like a couple of humans doing a job for us. So medical, ballistic vests. And then we have a kind of a catch-all. That's the kit campaign. And that is booties, goggles, GPS trackers for the search and rescue dogs. Those guys range out, man. They're pretty amazing to watch. In fact, before I forget, I want to invite you in August 23rd, 24th. We're helping to fund a course in Ohio.
Okay.
For dogs. This is the craziest shit I have ever seen. It's an underwater remains dog. So when people try to follow their boat, whatever, they put these dogs in the front of this boat, and these dudes take you out, and they're like, "Yeah, the body's right here." And dude, like,
is it because of the off-gassing? They're off-gassing and they can smell it, can't they? Jesus.
But like, think about the wind coming across a lake and how all that works. So the handler, like I talked about earlier with me and Spike, learning how he worked and how he figured things out. The handler and the dog learn how to, the wind's coming from here, the dog's, but so maybe we need to head this way a little bit more. Anyway, seriously, invitation's open. If nothing else, it'd be just cool just to see. And those dogs are awesome. It's so cool. So yeah, then we do the training classes. We just did one in Tampa, a medical course. There's a veterinarian. He's got a crew of 3 dudes, and they throw on this incredible medical course that starts with the technical stuff and then ends with scenarios. That's one format. They have a 3-day scenario-driven format course. It's pretty intense. We figured out, Andy, that the best way to take care of these dogs is to take the humans that have the biggest impact on those dogs' lives and teach them skills to keep the dog alive and them as well, and to be efficient. So we do some very small tactics stuff. We have to be really careful about who we allow to do that stuff, because a lot of people say they can do things with their dog that they can't do. Just simple obedience things that need your dog to be able to go down the hall and you tell the dog to lay down, and it does. That kind of stuff. A lot of cops can't do that. But they want those dogs involved in some of the clearance stuff. And in that case, this is what we teach them. So we've only taught probably a handful of those folks. What else do we teach? Decoy. The decoy, the dog that catches the dog or the guy who catches the dog when the dog bites can hurt the dog. Also can teach the dog a lot if they can understand how to read the dog, help it with its confidence, etc. So we teach that as well. So medical equipment to include ballistic vests. And then occasionally when we go to like some of the places, even New Haven, where I live now at school, they didn't have an obstacle course for their dogs. The dogs are supposed to be able to jump through windows and do all these things, but they didn't have anywhere to train them. So we pair up with the carpenters folks and their apprentices at the schools in that area. And we seek donations for materials, and we've almost always had them covered. And we built, these big obstacle courses for some Indiana, Ohio, Virginia, a couple, somewhere else. Well, I can't remember. Anyway, but we do that too. And really what it comes down to, Andy, for me is that I owe those dogs. And I owe the cops. And right now, just like us in the SEAL teams, cops are their own worst enemy. Man, it's funny to talk to the guys that I'm close with. They're like, something will come out on the news. And they're like, man, tomorrow's going to be a shitty day. Yeah. Just because that dude went out there and did that, stupid shit. And now I'm that guy, I owe him, and I really want to help him as much as I can. I feel like I'm in a good spot to do that through the dogs. But, here's the thing about the dogs, Andy. The dogs work with that officer, but they're also, with that officer's family. And they, with the rest of the guys on those calls, that shift in that department, and they help the community. And I think one of the things that people, there's been some talk recently, for obvious reasons, because cops do stupid shit and bite people that shouldn't get bit. But there's been a lot of talk about taking dogs out of the equation. And I think that comes from a place of ignorance. The dogs, I've been bit a bunch, and a dog bite is not going to kill you, right? Here's a good example. A cop friend recently was called with his dog to a residence. Mother called, said her son was on PCP, had been beating her and her daughter, and would not respond, and was crazy running around the house. Anyway, cop shows up. There's 2 cops there and the dog. I'm trying to talk to the guy. He's not listening to him. So what are their options at this point, right? I mean, the guy's been violent. He's beat his mother. He's beat his sister. He's threatening these guys with violence. So what are their options, right? They have their guns, and they have a taser, and they have the dog. And they're like, the dog, he's going to hurt the guy a little bit, but we'll once that guy's busy with the dog, we'll be able to get him under control and get him to the hospital where he can get help. And that's exactly what they did. So instead of killing the guy, shooting, like saying, hey, pulling their guns out, creating this tension and this conflict, they're like, hey, we're going to send the dog if you don't start acting better. And he's like, oh, fuck you. And they're like, all right,
here it comes.
Here's your tooth, dog. You wished for it. Here it is. So that's a good example of, and I remember there's a lot of times when you see guys running with knives and things like that, and they end up getting engaged. And I get it. And I understand why, and the cops are justified. But I think there's also no place there for the dogs. And
they're in my mind a false multiplier, like you said. It's another, metaphorical tool on an officer's Batman tool belt, because when they run out of tools, usually their last one is a lethal option. And I just don't want to see that used on anybody.
Yeah, no, unless it needs to be, right? Unless they've earned it and they're asking for it. And I get it. Even sometimes the people that are asking for it, because I was fixing to ask for it.
Yeah.
Did I really want to die? I don't know. I mean, not later, not after I got sober, right? Like, I think, that's an interesting thing, Andy. In our country right now, I see a lot of people talking about, we just need to shoot people. And
nope.
We need, guys like us need to talk about that a little bit, because that's not really all that effective.
Yeah. And I'm not interested in listening to people talk about what should be done or what could be done who have no idea the weight and gravity of those decisions and haven't dedicated large portions of their life to making decisions with shitty information in microseconds that could impact people's lives or the lives of people to your left. Oh, we should just shoot them. It's like, hey, even if I gave you a gun, you don't have the fucking stones to pull the trigger anyway. So why don't you shut up? Yeah. Right. Or you may have the idiocy to pull the trigger, but you don't know what the fuck's coming after. You haven't got a clue. And that's what these kids, like I mentioned, I'm the oldest undergrad right now, yelling. The kids ask me stuff. It's really cool. And I'm like, look, man, shooting people is easy. And they were like, I'm like, no, really. It's like, what, 4 pounds of pressure on the trigger. It's what comes after that's hard. And then they're like, man, that's a beautiful moment. Yeah. Those kids are going to be in charge of some shit someday. It's not Call of Duty, that's for sure. How can people get involved and support Spikes? I think the number one way you can get involved is, socials, all our social medias and stuff like that. But talk to the officers in your town. Let them know that we're out there. Like, some of the folks that are going to listen to this are law enforcement folks, man. I'm telling you, we got it for you. We're your huckleberry. Pass the word. And truthfully, in the law enforcement community, the number one way to gain credibility is word of mouth. Like, they don't trust people. And I don't blame them, truthfully. In fact, that's actually been a little bit of a problem. People are like suspect. Like, why do you want to give us this stuff? Like, what? Like, we went to Honolulu and built them an obstacle course. And they took like 2 months to do a background investigation. Like, they wanted to make sure I wasn't Jeffrey Dahmer or something. So definitely helping us with social media, being on that and passing the word to the officers. And then, of course, we need resources. We need donations. We need to be able to continue the mission. And I think, we've raised probably close to $5 million over the time we've been in existence, about 8, 9 years. So, we're somewhat small in the grand scheme of things, but like I said, we've helped close to 2,300 dogs in the country, and there's like 25,000 of them. Yeah. So we really need some help in that regard. So if you have ideas, anybody who's listening to this has ideas of people who might be interested in it or that love dogs and want to help them and are interested in making sure the law enforcement folks are taken care of and are positive about making America, the vision that it's supposed to be, What's the best website for them to go to get more information and support? Yeah, spikescaninefund.org. SPIKES, letter K, number 9.org. Perfect. I'm going to let you close it out, man. What do you want to leave people with? Never underestimate your ability to affect the trajectory of another human life, especially at their most vulnerable moment. The reason I'm sitting here talking to stud like Andy is because some people, when I was really fucked up, took care of me. And now I'm doing what I can to help our country and our communities, and it's important. And look, man, things aren't always great. Things aren't always easy, and we need to take care of each other. Maybe be a little easier on each other and see each other's humanity. Yeah, it's taken me too many laps around the sun to come to the realization that you never know what's going on. You never know what's going on in somebody else's world, man. Like, you can encounter people who have a great facade and they're having the worst fucking day of their life, and they're looking for a reason to not give up. And if you can develop a little, like the world that we came from, man, we were forged by a hammer to be a knife. And it's like, we're just going to cut and cut and cut and cut. And sometimes it's not the best tool. Like, I'm super thankful for the experiences that I have, but I am getting to the place where I'm more thankful for the experiences that I have had since I have been out. It's just, the previous experiences shaped who I am, but I would rather try to be that voice and try to help people in that moment of need now than to do any more damage. I mean, how easy is it to break shit? We broke shit for a career.
Right.
It's a lot harder to rebuild.
That's why I spend 3 days a week in the art gallery at Yale. Because it's full of shit that people did for other people. They're dead, and it's beautiful when we come in, But hey, on that note, and I don't know, please don't edit this out. Andy, you're a fucking leader, man. And I think with your experience, especially coming from the background that we come from and the way that you communicate, I hope you get after it, because you can definitely affect some change. And I hope I can be there with you.
Yeah, man. I'll do what I can. I would have tased you that night just because, given the opportunity. If I recognized you, I would have fucking given you a taser. Right?
That probably would have been fun, actually.
Awesome.
Fuck.
Well, Jimmy,
right,
dude,
man.
let's stay in touch, and thank you for your time.
Dude, it makes me so happy to see you successful, and I'm here for you, bro. So let me know.
Awesome. Thanks, Jimmy.
Peace.
If you enjoyed today's episode and you want to find out more about Jimmy Hatch and Spikes Canine, please visit spikescaninefund.org. That is spikescaninefund.org. Thanks again for listening to Change Agents, an Ironclad original. We're going to be back next week, as always, with an all-new episode.